Geico presents Our Town, Season 4, a 30-minute podcast produced by Best Bark Communications, a small but fierce client-centered marketing company powered by decades of experience and well-established business networks. Geico, 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance. Now, here's your host, Andy Ockershausen.
This is Andy Ockershausen. This is Our Town, and I've been ordered to do a great intro for this man. But he doesn't need a great intro because he's a great broadcaster and a great radio guy. And I'm so delighted that one of the WMAL graduates who's made it big time is Steven Portnoy of ABC. That's the American Broadcasting Company, which is now Disney. Welcome to Our Town, Steve.
Thank you, sir. It's good to be with you. I should amend that. I was with ABC for many years, and now I'm with CBS. But so now I've worked for two networks.
You dumped our network. We're ABC. We're still ABC people here. I don't know why, but we are. But, you know, we go along with the flow, of course. But, Stephen, you've had a great career, both while you were here, while you left here, and now you're with CBS. But you can look back and think of the great days of WMAL because you were at the tail end of it. But you were here, nevertheless.
Well, I feel like I was saying earlier to lovely Janice here, I feel like I've come back to college because I spent, my formative years in our business right here in these studios here at WMAL Radio, actually talking through these same Sennheiser microphones. But I was here for about 3.5 years for the WMAL Radio News Department, and then made the move to ABC Network News and was on this radio station still for another 11 years or so. So I have a pretty long connection with this station. And
you moved down to the downtown with another WMAL graduate is in charge of news.
Robin Verbuchen.
Robin Verbuchen started right here in that newsroom behind.
Robin Verbuchen Sproul. Charles Gibson, also another very famous voice who rose through the ranks from WMAL to ABC News.
Let me tell you how important I was. I'm flying in red eye from Los Angeles, and I needed somebody to give me a ride and pick me up, so the news director sent Charlie Gibson. Giving me a ride from the airport. He never forgot it. He loved it. He talks about it now and he remembers the good old days. People love to help each other.
Sure. Well, I mean, very famous names have passed through these halls. I mean, we could talk about the legends of WMAL radio. We just lost one, Bill Mayhew, in the last couple of weeks.
I know, so sad.
Yeah.
But Bill hadn't been well for a while, and Shirley had died before him. But we were just talking with the chief of police of Montgomery County about Johnny Holiday, another one of our guys out of this studio and working with Janice in the morning. And, they're still around, thank God.
Well, Hardin and Weaver, we had, Trumbull and Core, and big names. Janice mentioned that I came in sort of at the tail end of that epic era of WMAL radio. When I first joined, Chris Core was on in the evenings. You had Charlie Warren on in the overnights, and the big part of D.C. history was when the snipers were caught, and it was because a listener was tuned into WMAL radio and happened to hear Charlie Warren mention the license plate of the Chevy Caprice that they were looking for.
But they got him at a rest stop somewhere.
That's up in Frederick. That's exactly right. And so you had, but at the time, though, this was the era of the radio station when it was making the transition from sort of a general mass appeal talk, sort of the last vestige of full-service radio on the AM band, into the much more keenly focused conservative talk radio.
Narrowed the interest level,
right,
from broad to narrow, but they work. That was forced upon by the advent of FM radio. FM radio changed the whole spectrum, and so many stations got on the air, and we were fortunate to have a great signal in AM, but the FM was hurting us. And the audience went to FM, younger. I found people under 40 never, ever listened to an AM station. I'm talking about 40 years ago they didn't listen.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. And yet, one of the great things about the history of this radio station, which dates back to 1925, is the fact that it continues to evolve and remain relevant to younger people. And what's also amazing in this, almost 90th year of the existence of the station is just in the last, we're speaking, but we should probably mention it just for the hell of it. We're speaking on October 31st, 2018, Halloween. The October ratings just came out for 2018. WMAL has a 5 share, 12 plus, which your eyes just widened. Exactly, because the idea that this radio station, having been great, is now kind of poised for modern greatness with, you got Vince and Mary in the morning. You've got, Ben Shapiro is one of the new stars of talk radio. He has a great show that's on in the evenings on this station. So not to make the entire thing a commercial for WMAL.
Why not? Go ahead.
Right. Yeah. But let me I was hoping, in as much as I'm returning to my alma mater, to ask you a few questions, sir, in this half hour we have together.
Let me tell you one question. I'll answer before you ask the question.
All right.
This used to have a 25.
Yeah. All right. Fine. That's fine.
But that's what's changed. Yeah. Thank God for 5. I bet they make it a lot of money with a 5 share. Yeah. What do you think of that?
Well, I hope so. I mean, Janice
that's
might
an
have
audience. That's a lot of people, a 5 share. You're talking 6 million people.
Potentially.
A 5 share is main sense to me.
But let's talk about the days of the 25 share, because, this radio station, you ran it from 1960 through 1986. So that was the period of time when it was owned by the Evening Star newspaper company.
Correct.
Co-owned with Channel 7. In the late 1970s, the station was sold to ABC. You became the manager of an ABC O&O. And in that era, in the late 1970s and early 1980s, this radio station was the epicenter of broadcast entertainment in Washington. What was your philosophy as you ran this operation through that whole period, and basically helped it transition from the latter days of network radio greatness to the late 1950s, early 1960s? We were a network
affiliate.
That's not just a network affiliate, but a key network station in Washington.
We were something called the Red and the Blue Network. They split NBC. One of the guys I worked with was a messenger. Worked with me, a little bald-headed guy from Virginia named Willard Scott. I mean, there's the kind of people, and Ed Walker, they worked in the business. But Willard and I worked in the same building, the Translux building. But we transitioned out of the network world of really good radio, but the times had changed, into being our own self.
But when you say really good network radio, we're talking about like the Lone Ranger and the Green Hornet. I mean, that's what you mean.
I got the big discs. That's how we played it. They put a big disc out. They sent them to us once a week.
The transcription discs, which look like big LPs.
Huge.
Right. And
they were a network. Balkage talking. We had people that are Elmer Lewis, Fulton Lewis Jr. They were all on our
Harvey.
air. But Hardin and Weaver were staff announcers.
That's right.
Although Jackson was an actor. He had been a child actor in Buffalo, and he came down here and became an actor on radio. We would actually do in the market radio programs about the Green Hornet and all that on local.
Yeah.
So we transitioned out of that and said, we got to have the secret of a good radio station has to have a strong morning show. It all begins with the AM. That's AM, 6 a.m. And the guy that was hired by a McKinsey company to revitalize the whole Washington Star situation. And incidentally, being owned by the Star was a great treat. That was a great newspaper. Mm-hmm. But they left us alone. They didn't want anything to do with broadcast except send them the money. Mm-hmm. But these two guys were on our staff. They were doing a network show called Frank and Jackson. They were doing that for ABC on Saturday night. It was on like a half hour, an hour. Nobody listened, but a lot of people did and say, these guys have got talent. So the idea came, let's put them on the morning show. But that's only part of what we were after. We had to become a bigger part of our town. And that is, I believe that we had to be involved in more ways than you thought possible. And I thought maybe the way through to that was doing charity work on the air. Like, I want everybody involved in this radio station to do something in the public. Because if you give it, you get it back in spades.
And that's exactly right, what you're talking about, the community service elements of the radio station. You can think of the things that Tom Gager did at the Kennedy Center with the Salvation Army. You could think of the Hardin and Weaver charity golf tournaments. And
Children's Hospital, they never asked for a dime. Did you know that? They bragged about that. People would send them money, and they'd go in there and say, the Fairfax Police Department just sent us a check for $200 to go into Children's Hospital. Suddenly, other people heard it, and somebody from Montgomery said, well, we're going to send you money, too. And the thing grew into a huge charity.
You also became an essential part, I think, of local commerce. You were involved with the Board of Trade. You really, as the general manager of the radio station, got in there with the titans of the community.
Salvation Army, Police Boys and Girls Club, Fight Night. I could name you, 30 charities. Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, the Bethesda Chevy Chase Chamber of Commerce, the Alexandria Chamber of Commerce.
Neediest
we tried
kids.
to get involved in everything.
And think also about how important it is for this all to be going on here in Washington, D.C., because you have the Congress, you've got the FCC, you've got, national advocacy types, all looking to this radio station as a model for what broadcasting is and should be.
And Andy's hasn't mentioned, but the National Association of Broadcasters, NAB,
Right.
which he was very, very much involved in.
Yeah, I was deeply involved. I got so involved I became chairman of the board. It was an election fight, and I won the election. I beat some TV guys. That was a radio
I'm not surprised by that.
But those were the good old days. To be on the board was an honor, but to be chairman of the board, 50 states that I was in charge of their broadcast lobbying and working with the Hill. It was so great. One of the things, Stephen, that I really believed in is that we have to be very careful with the commercial content. I really believe that we had to have, you can't have good commercials. We just didn't have any bad commercials, and there's a big difference.
And explain what you mean by that, because you're not talking about necessarily the types of products or services that are being advertised. You're talking about the way they're being advertised.
Absolutely. The commercial message had to be delivered with some degree of authenticity. It had to be a good product. And we watched that very carefully. We also were very careful of disparaging. We didn't believe it for a commercial. And yet I believe 25% of what we did was commercial. So it had to be very good. Like the music had to be great.
The creative.
The personality had to be great. And the news had to be great.
Right.
So they all went together to make a package. And we believed that it was going to take time. It wasn't going to happen overnight. We had to let some people go. We changed from like a Jerry Strong and a Herb Davis and people like that to talented guys with the Army band named Bill Trumbull, who was a nervous wreck. He happened to be a good friend of Eddie Fisher. And I said, well, any friend of Eddie Fisher we'll hire. Right. Chris Core was a newsman, and we put them together. You mentioned Gager. Felix Grant. Right. Guy would tell me, he said, Andy, I'm from Dubuque, Iowa. I have been in a taxi cab about 6 or 7 times. He said, at night, all I listen to is somebody named Felix Grant in a cab. He said, that's impossible. I said, that's the way it is.
The album sound show
Correct.
that Felix Grant did was a nationally known real treasure, really, for jazz music in the late 1960s, 70s. He kind of sort of brought bossa nova to America. What was it like to work with?
How did you know that, Stephen, about the bossa nova?
I'm telling you, this man loves the history of radio.
Well,
that's what makes this is such a great interview.
And what's so great about being here with you guys is the fact that I feel like I'm sitting next to a legend of broadcasting who really truly has embodied all of these ethics and principles about what a radio station should be
and could be.
And
that was the fortunate part. We had management at the star level that let us do our own thing, didn't try to make us anything that we weren't. And having Felix and having Bill Mayhew follow Felix, 2 different people, but Mayhew had everybody overnight that cared about radio. It was music till dawn and Bill Mayhew. That's the way it was.
Well, Larry Krebs on the police beat.
Do you believe that story?
Well, listen, the whole idea
Nobody else had overnight radio.
Well, it's true. I mean, you had competitor that was doing all news, but the idea was with Larry Krebs that he would keep listeners who were tuned in to American popular standards or other kind of music on the radio station aware of what was going on, even in the depths of the city, in the suburbs,
our town,
all over our town,
and he lived it. His life was that radio job that he had at WMAL. I can tell you, he didn't do it for money, but he was available 24/7.
Well, speaking of money, I mean, that's a question I have for you. I know you made this radio station a lot of money because of the quality of the programming, the quality of the commercials, the relationships that you had with business leaders, the relationships that the talent had with the audience. What was your philosophy about spending money?
I believe that the stockholders deserved a return on the investment, and I didn't believe in overpaying. And I can tell you this without a shadow, we never lost anybody before money. So whatever they were offered, And, Hardin and Weaver were romanced by NBC New York. They flew them up there, did everything in the world. Money never was an issue. It never dawned on them to come back and demand more money because they were happy. They were doing radio, which they believed in, and they had been doing it very successfully. And they said to each other, why should we go to New York? It's going to be a fight.
One of the things that radio stations do, and that this radio station has done to this day, to its infinite credit for a guy like me, is play jingles to kind of sort of bring the audience in. I brought with me today a very small montage of just some of the jingles that aired on this radio station for about 20 years, starting in the mid to late 1960s through the mid 1980s.
Here for a groovy day to pass the time away and catch the world as it goes by. WMAL.
In later days.
WMAL, AM 63. WMAL, AM 63, Washington. The number one voice, WMAL in Washington.
So let me just tell a couple stories about these jingles. I style myself as a jingle freak, and there are a few of us in this business who really, truly kind of sort of really get the history of all this. What you just heard were 4 separate jingles. The first one was by a company called the Heller Corporation in Los Angeles. Heller Ferguson, that's right. And the gentleman's name was Hugh Heller, and he was a jingle composer who worked with another composer named Dick Hamilton, who to this day now lives in Sarasota, as renowned as a composer and musician down there. But he had a studio. They had a studio on Hollywood and Highland, just near where the Oscars are given out each year. And you, sir, commissioned some jingles from them in the late 1960s and 1970s. Do you have any remembrances of that?
Hugh Heller was a friend of a friend of mine. It was not a broadcaster, but was a rep. Ralph Gill and Darren McGavin, they were a rep. But Ralph was a friend, and he knew Hugh Heller. So he opened the door for Hugh Heller, who was selling a package of advertising that you'd go to somebody and they'd sponsor it, and they would give us these jingles. Jingles came second.
In the business, we call this barter.
Yeah, correct. They were barter. But we wanted something different, so Hugh grasped what we were about our town, and he grasped what WMAL was, and he spent a lot of time in town listening and talking to people, and he became a very dear friend. I visited him in Highland. I visited him in Los Angeles. I know all about it. And Alan Ferguson was a lyricist, I believe. And Hugh did the music, and they went in their studio in Los Angeles and came back and presented us with a package of jingles that just knocked me right over my head. Wow. Things I never thought about. I had listened to them. They did KMPC Los Angeles. They did KSFO San Francisco. Right. They had a list of clients out of this world, and they put us in the big time with those jingles.
Well, they're the ones who wrote the "We Like to Be in Washington D.C."
That is correct.
Anthem of the station that lived for almost 2 decades on the air.
We still use it. Janice and I do illegally.
We play it on a regular basis.
But so I mean,
it's incredible when you listen to that. He captured what we are. You know,
he had every style.
Memorials of marble and monuments of stone.
And every style of music, he did a version in the bossa
nova.
Yeah.
He did big band,
and beautiful, intricate harmonies too with their own
beautiful,
singers.
Deep, gorgeous, full symphony music. Yeah.
Right. So that's the Heller jingles that basically were on the air through the mid 1970s, and then you folks took your business to a fantastic jingle composer and producer named John Wolford down in Dallas, a good friend of mine at Jam Creative Productions, and Jam. Did 3 real packages for WMAL radio, but the ones that we heard in that short little montage were from Focal Point, a package that John put together for you in 1979, and then the number one voice in 1983. What was it like to work with John Wolford in Dallas?
Unfortunately, I was a dead duck by then. I had moved into... Where did I go? Cable television.
No, so this is the late 1970s, early 80s?
Yeah, no, I left there in 86.
All right. Well,
you
were probably
had the whole thing.
There's a good chance that you probably had your PD maybe kind of sort of took that ball and ran
It
with it.
It would have been Mark Kuhn. It would have been Jim Gallant and Eileen Griffin.
All the names you know,
Yeah,
they
sure.
were here. But I enjoyed it. I was still a part of it because of Janet.
Well,
I had an
You
intro
also
into
signed
it.
you signed the checks too.
Stephen, we better take a break here so we
Speaking
get a
of which.
deep breath. And this has been a wonderful conversation with Steve Portnoy, who is Mr. WMAL. This is Andy Ockershausen. This is Our Town.
Technology Truths, brought to you by Geico.
Technology Truth.
Truth, you have 14 login passwords, and you can't remember any of them.
Doug 1. Doug 2. Doug is awesome. Doug is awesome 1, 2, 3.
Truth, it's so easy to switch and save on car insurance at geico.com.
Doug is super cool ampersand underscore exclamation point 1985. Knew it.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
This is Attorney Mike Collins. Come to my seminar and I'll explain in plain English all you need to know about wills, trusts, taxes, probate, and how to keep your money in your family. I'll show you how to eliminate those dread death taxes and avoid the expense and delay of probate. See how our reservoir trust can protect your family's inheritance from lawsuits and the divorce court. Thousands of your neighbors have already attended. So watch the mail for your special invitation and register now at MikeCollins.com. That's MikeCollins.com.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen. Brought to you by Best Bark Communications.
This is Our Town. This is Andy Ockershausen, along with Steven Portnoy, Mr. WMAL.
Oh, jeez. You're Mr. WMAL.
I wish so. I think that because I fell into it. I really didn't have any training. I just did it because I worked here as a page. I was here as I made $21 a week when I started.
Wow.
And I finished, I made 25, so I did.
Yeah, right. But so you ran this radio station, WMAL Radio, from 1960 to 1986, and you presided over a tremendous broadcast team that sort of helped Washington live through the tumultuous period of the 1960s and the 1970s and the early 1980s, with a newsroom that blanketed the city and kind of sort of also helped walk the audience through Vietnam and Watergate. What was that?
Shootings, Puerto Rico shooting up the White House or shooting the Blair House. These guys were involved in everything because they love being news guys.
Well, and also, I mean, you mentioned it earlier in the show about the commitment that you made to news. How important was it that you had not just an association with the network, but a strong local radio newsroom?
Well, I had a lot of disagreements with ABC because they wanted to force us to take more of the feed, and I would say we carry everything we carry, and we didn't carry anything. We tried to keep them off the air to do our own local stuff.
Well, and
they were taking up our valuable airtime selling their cheap commercials, and we didn't want that. We wanted to sell our own commercials.
For the audience's benefit, in the late 1960s, ABC as the radio network actually split off into 4 demographically targeted...
4 networks.
That's right, sub-networks. So the primary network was the ABC Information Network, and then there was the Entertainment Network, the Contemporary Network, which was heard on top 40 stations like WABC and WLS. Right. And then there was something called the FM Network that would have been...
Right, that was going to be us too.
Right. So the
Vanilla.
Right.
Very vanilla.
But the the Information Network in that era was very bold and big and brassy and also long. You had an issue with some of the taking all the network content in that era.
Right, correct. We would take their commercials, but we didn't take their programming because we wanted to help them make money. That was important that they make money. But we also wanted to make money, so we became partners really in WMAL. Everybody in New York loved our radio station. One of the things when we first started, we wanted to impress them, and I did this with our advertising reps. We took a segment of the Hardner Weaver program and bought time on WMCA in New York at 9:15 in the morning, 15 minutes, and had all the salespeople go around and take little radios to advertisers and time buyers in New York, and tune it in at 9:15 to WMCA, and there was WML Radio.
That's incredible. That's insane. I can't believe WMCA sold to you like that.
Absolutely.
Wow.
They needed the money.
What a brilliant strategy. It's a whole lot easier than taking cassette tapes all around New York City.
Yeah, it was impressive. I mean, it just worked because it wasn't a big deal, but it showed all these dipsy time buyers, like we said, they got 12-year-olds buying airtime, but they had no idea about what we were. They'd see call letters, and by playing that and getting that publicity, it was worth its weight in gold.
Brilliant. What a great, I never heard that story before.
It's a rep.
Janice notes that this radio station in the late 60s, early 70s, into the 80s, was going up against a full-time all-news radio station, which, as we now know, owns this market. What was it like to go up against that station, which at the time was not as popular as WMAL, and what was the idea of competing against an all-news station?
Well, our news stood on its own feet, and the fact that they were all news and we were partial news, every time the award ceremonies came out, we were winning all the awards because of the quality of the broadcaster, not of the news. The news stays the same. But we had people delivering the news with great voices, Ed Meyer, Bob Neiser.
Bud Steele.
They were all professionals, and they were broadcasters. And WTOP didn't have that. They had a bunch of announcers reading news, and there's a big difference. Our guys, we had 100 people in the news department one time. I said, we got to get rid of some people.
I guess that goes back to spending money.
But the voices were incredible when you think about it, and it was all about delivery, and the guys loved it, and we had a lot of females on the air. That was another first. What was her name?
Milagro Sardine,
Milagros, yeah.
Karen Leggett, Carol Preston, and we were all led by the news hen, Dorothy Jones.
Wow.
But the female announcers were unique to radio.
Sure, in that era.
Female broadcasters. Oh, yeah, and they were great. Part of the team.
What was also unique, well, I guess not necessarily unique to the industry, but probably unique to local radio in that era was that you'd see it, and you can go on YouTube, you can kind of sort of watch these things, but local television and radio managers, but not as often in radio, would provide editorials on the air. And you took that on as a responsibility. Why? Was it difficult working with corporate on this, or did you just kind of sort of have free reign to do it?
Well, we just did. We just did what we thought was best for our town. And we had, I believe, a brilliant news director named Len Dybert, who wrote all the underpinnings of the editorial. He would give me either the editorial outline, and we'd sit in the studio and record it. But they were local issues. They were issues that our people who are on the street felt very strongly about as news people, and they wanted some action in it. And they go to Len Dybert and say, we've got a problem here, we got a problem there, and we could get on it as an editorial. I can tell you that it works wonders. It wasn't easy because we didn't do it frivolously. We only did it but one of the people that suffered was our news guy, who was Mr. Capitol Hill, named Joseph McCaffrey. But we felt strongly about National Airport. And the parking at National Airport was being, a big part of it was taken for people up on the hill.
So they could park for free at Reagan National, what was then National Airport.
The staff, the members, and so forth.
Wow.
And we took it on as a project, and the people up on Capitol Hill took McCaffrey's parking place away.
Really?
We had no parking up on Capitol Hill because of our editorials. And
wow.
We loved it. We told McCaffrey to take a cab. But we really had so much success with editorials. I mean, people would call out of the woodwork and say, we want you to do this, we want you to do that. And but it was all on our town, and it was all important about our town. We didn't try to take on worldwide issues. We stuck right here.
But it speaks to the influence that the radio station had in this marketplace. I mean, this radio station was listened to inside the White House. Hardin and Weaver were part of, I'm sure,
absolutely,
Ronald Reagan's morning.
Absolutely. George Bush lived there as a congressman. Did you know that?
Sure.
His family listened. And Barbara, they listened to Hardin and Weaver in the morning.
Right.
They told me that. Wow. The chief, it was just here, the chief, Tom Manger, his mother and father, his father had it on so loud it hurt his ears every morning. He was younger, but he said, I went to school, my dad listening to Hardin and Weaver. Yeah. And that's the way it was. Right. And the people at the White House. I mean, we had a campaign here with Trumbull called So Others Might Eat. We were big with charity.
Sure.
That was theirs. And I got a phone call. Somebody set it up with the White House. No, it was then she was vice president. Barbara Bush was going to donate a cake, and we're going to auction off a cake. So Hardin and Weaver are pushing it, and they sent me down to pick up the cake. They didn't send me down. They asked me to go down. So I go down to the, not the mansion, she was vice president then. And Barbara Bush said to me, we had the cake already, she said, I listened to you guys. I know what's going on. She said, but I got to tell you, I didn't bake this cake.
No kidding.
My steward, they're Navy.
Yeah,
the Navy
sure,
mess
of course.
handles
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
My steward baked the cake. So she made the cake, and I brought it in. We auctioned off. I got $4,000 or $5,000. It was all charity, and the Trombone Corps loved it. But she was a listener to our station.
Janice sends me a note. She goes, so many listeners would tell us our dial is rusted on AM 63.
I can believe it. It's a great, great signal.
Yeah.
You missed the days of the great signal. You could hear this thing in Buffalo Gap. You could feel it in your teeth, and you could hear it in Baltimore.
The last time I saw you, actually, before we recorded this, was at the decommissioning of the Green Tree Road transmitter site.
Oh, I remember that.
That, and for listeners who might not be aware, if next time you're heading up the American Legion Bridge from Virginia into Maryland, and you're making that way around the Beltway, right at the point where the Beltway meets 270, right after that interchange, there, if you continue on the Beltway to your left, you'll hopefully, by the time people hear this, it'll still be there. 4 broadcast towers through the trees, and that is a section of Bethesda where from 1941 through 2018, the WMAL AM radio signal emanated from those
4 towers,
from that 4-tower array, which means then that every single broadcast of every single president, from Franklin Roosevelt to Donald Trump, radiated from those towers. It's one of those things that, in our town, you might not appreciate until you think about it for a second.
Steven, I wouldn't, but you bring a light to something that is a fact, that signal, both in the tower and in the ground, you had good copper in the ground, too, was so important to our success. Now, WTOP was our enemy. They were doing all news. They were doing great, but they got a signal problem in, guess what, in our town.
Yeah, how about that?
You can hear them in Nova Scotia,
Yes.
but you couldn't hear them at 14th and F.
Oh, that's funny. That's I guess the luck
a
of
true
luck,
story.
but also the luck of the draw.
We had airliners say that they could listen to WTOP when they're coming in over the Atlantic, but they'd switch to WMAL because the signal was so much better.
That's
in the
funny.
airplane.
Yeah. Well, it helps explain that station's move to FM and WMAL's move to FM.
Absolutely.
Which makes me wonder what you think of the contemporary radio marketplace industry. What would you do differently?
It's narrowed demographically. It has split up into many, many divisions. I don't think that a full-service radio station would be impossible now. It's gone too far. There's too much narrow. WMAL is narrow now. The old news station is narrow compared to the universe. The rock and roll stations, I don't even think they exist anymore. But there are some music stations. Whatever happened to WGAY? Was that a great sound to listen to? You wanted to get away from it? Gone. You don't have. I don't know of a radio station that plays good music as we know it.
No, well, because there's just different distribution points now. It's not, people aren't focused on the radio to get their music from. But I did want to say one thing. In the transition, I was here from 1977 to 2009. One of the things that I lived through, which you might be interested in, Stephen, is that Andy left so much, such a big onion with so many layers of product and programming that it was peeled off a little bit at a time. And it took about 14 years really to get where it is today. Yeah. Because when WTEM came in and took the rights of the Redskins away, that was one layer of the onion that left. And I remember Zamira Jones, my sales manager, says, because I was so upset we were losing the Redskins, at that time I was in the sales department, said, Janice, most radio stations don't have what you have now. You had, so much product. You still have a great radio stations, even though the Redskins are gone. And so it took like 14 years after that to take the sports away, to take the, because Maryland University football and basketball went away. And then Capitals hockey was gone. But there was so much of the richness of our radio station and our product that it took a long time for it to disintegrate.
Well,
or to evolve and to be reborn into the great radio station product that it is today.
And that speaks to the legacy of Andy Ockershouse. And
well, to all the cast and crew and everybody that worked so hard, it wasn't easy, But Janice makes it. I recall how important the Redskins were, not the team, but to have that relationship. It was chemistry. Redskins have lost that chemistry. They still haven't gotten it back.
Right.
The audience
I think
is
it
not
might
there.
be. I think it might be making a comeback now.
We'll see how they do
They're
this
winning,
season, right.
but they've won before, honey. This ain't the first time they've been 5-2.
Well, as we tape this,
Yes.
the thing of it is, there are a few unifiers in our town. Perhaps the weather.
We were doing hockey before anybody else, too. I want you to note that. We were broadcasting hockey games with Ron Weber because of the relationship I had with Abe Poland. So we had a little bit of everything and maybe too much of one or the other, but all the talent was involved. Trumbull and Cord did a Redskins broadcast without ever being anything with the Redskins. And when the team won, WMAL celebrated.
But, when you think of our town, you think of, obviously the district, Montgomery County, Prince George's County, Fairfax County, Arlington County, Alexandria, the outer suburbs. You think of varying ethnic and social groups and economic groups, vast disparities between them. There are only a few things that unify everyone in this community. They include weather, really lousy traffic, sports. But for the latter half of the 20th century, WMAL was a big part of what made our town
When you mentioned traffic, I had been listening to the guy in Chicago, and they had a crash out there, and they lost their helicopter. But I went out and talked to them how they did it, and they said, they got to have authority in the air, so we need a cop. So I had to go to the police department and beg them to lend us one of their traffic officers to fly in their helicopter to do. We were doing it before anybody
I was going to
else.
say, you essentially invented airborne traffic reporting.
Not me.
Well, I mean, you could have said it was a bad idea.
Yeah, that's right. No. We started it here with policemen and didn't try to do it cheap. Right. Somebody was doing it against us, and eventually we hired him to fly the airplane. Mm-hmm. They call him Captain Dan. He was on WWDC.
Sure.
But Lieutenant Humphreys was a member of the Metropolitan Police Department, and we got permission to fly over Montgomery County, to fly over Alexandria, to fly as far up a Marlboro to the Bay. We were doing it when nobody else was doing traffic.
Speaking of things that sort of got their start in this market, if nothing else, and you mentioned WWDC, the call letters. On WWDC FM in the early 1980s, there was a gentleman by the name of Howard Stern. Perhaps you've heard of him. What was your impression of that period, if you have any memories in the early 80s when, if at all, was he something that entered your orbit? Or
he was in the 80s, actually.
Yeah.
I think he was one of the most talented people I'd ever heard, along with the Grease Man. They were talented people in their own way, with different attraction. Howard Stern was funny, and smart. Man, he was smart. But he was a little bit on the,
the edge?
Crude side.
Yeah, sure.
But the Grease Man was an actor. And he did all his show as acting, with his, he had the cop that he talked to, he had the ranger. I mean, what a talented man in radio, and then he went too far with his talent.
But you obviously, as a broadcast professional, you admire.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, all right.
They were money makers for him, but
That's
they weren't, but they didn't, they did all the funny stuff, but they didn't do traffic, they didn't do weather to the extreme that we did.
Well, not with the seriousness, at least.
It's extreme. We did it extreme,
Yeah.
Frank Harden never missed a break in the morning show when he didn't say what the time was. I mean, I used to say, Frank, you're driving me crazy. You just have done the time 10 times in the last 5 minutes. He said, everybody's interested in time.
Right. When you had Bert Cohen, the Duke of Durwood, on in season 3, I remember the subject of labor management relations came up. You never had any kind of difficulty with any of the unions here, did you?
We got along well with the unions because I felt that in the strictest sense, unions were a great part of what we were. To keep labor peace was important, to make sure the guys were happy. And, we never had a union problem that wasn't our fault. I mean, seriously now, like guys missing lunch hour, improper scheduling, send them out somewhere without proper information or clothing. We never had a problem. And when we did, we solved it. And we made sure everybody made money. That was important to everybody.
I feel like I need to fill in one of the gaps of that fantastic show that you had with Bert for anyone who didn't quite catch it. But he referenced something called the letter. Do you remember what it was? Because my recollection of it, as he described it to me, I don't know, 15 years ago, was the idea that he was a member of the NABET union and he could never lose his job because he had that letter.
I'll tell you about that later. We're going to take a break right now with Portnoy. You're bringing up Portnoy's complaint. This is Andy Ockershausen with Steven Portnoy.
Hi, Tony Sybil here to tell you about Tony and Joe's and Nick's Riverside Grill at Washington Harbor in Georgetown. Spectacular new restaurants. We've spent a lot of time rebuilding. You'll love it. It's really fantastic. For any information, you can go online to tonyandjoes.com. It'll be a wonderful experience for the whole family. Call 202-944-4545 to make reservations. Everything is fabulous. You've got to come down and have some wonderful food.
Hi, I'm Charles Mann. For athletes like me, playing every down in a pro game is like getting in a car accident. After years of playing football in Washington, my body is broken. I've had countless surgeries and joint replacements. I've been looking for a non-surgical treatment since I ended my career. I heard a radio ad for a seminar about alternative treatment. It's called regenerative medicine, which stimulates your own body to heal and repair itself. No surgery, no more pain. That got my attention. I went to a seminar to learn firsthand all about it. Now you too can benefit and receive this treatment. This is the same procedure that pro athletes use to quickly and effectively recover from injury. If you're looking to eliminate your pain and arthritis, or if you thought surgery was your only option, take the first step like I did. Call 410-787-7250. Register for the next seminar and learn more about this breakthrough procedure. Seating is limited. Register now by calling 410-787-7250 and start living life again.
You're listening to Our Town with Andy Ockershausen.
This is Andy Ockershausen, and this is Our Town. I have a robust conversation with Steven Portnoy, who reminded me of a situation we had in our labor negotiation with something called the NABET, the National Association of Broadcast Engineers and Technicians. I don't know what they call them now, but it was a great relationship. And the world was changing, and our performers, always we had engineering people or technicians behind the microphone. They did not play their own music, did not play their own records. They were all babied. So the company said,
babied.
The company let them know that we're changing. We're getting away from the help and teaching the talent to run the boards.
We're going combo, as we say in the business.
Going combo. We do everything. And we had people like Felix Grant had been in the business for 50 years and never touched a record. You know, he wouldn't touch one. He didn't know anything. I mean, we were worried about Ken Beatrice getting a hold of it. Who knew what he was going to do? And Hardin Weaver was a little easier because they had been in radio. Frank had been in radio a long time when he ran his own board, so it wasn't new to him. But during that transition, there was some changes in the union, and they were going to change one of our technicians named Bert Cohen, and he was going to perform another duty or get fired. So he came to me, and somebody in our program department said, we can't lose Bert. So I gave him a letter from management saying that this job was irreplaceable, or something. The language was, whatever he was doing was irreplaceable. Therefore, I recommend he never be, or not recommend, I announce that he'll never be discharged.
And you promised it, and you put it in writing. And a
letter.
Right. And you left in 86.
Yeah.
Bert didn't leave for almost another 20 years. They couldn't fire him because you wrote a letter. Not that they would. But
they would have fired him.
Oh, jeez.
He was a part of the show.
Yeah.
He integrated himself. He was best guy we ever had doing football because he became part of the team, you know. Frank, Sam, and Sonny, and Bert. And that's the way it was. He was with them, and they were all like this. And having that technician was so important to the broadcast.
Right. Speaking of which, you know, as I look across the glass into what was then the WMAL Master Control Room when I first started here in 2003, I remember when I first started, there were literally still racks of carts on the wall with the Barbara Mandrell and the Johnny Mathis songs still on them. And it was, I think it was Randall Bloomquist was the PD who finally insisted that those carts had to go away. But I thought it was the coolest thing that the music library was still in the studio, just in case, because you never really know.
Well, that music library was very important. Janice ran the library for a while. Yeah. You know, we used to have a problem with the morning show with the music. So I made Frank, before Janice got in touch with it, take Bill Trumbull's music from the day before and play it the next morning.
Flip it over and play it in a different order.
Right.
The audience was always different. It's an AM show and a PM show.
Sure.
So we flipped it over. It made it so much easier. I said, don't be a genius. He's already a genius. Take his playlist, pick it up, and play it. And they did. They made it easy for him.
Yeah.
But they didn't play much music. Maybe 3 or 4 times an hour they'd have music.
And the hymn and the march.
Right, of course. Yes.
That was not music. That was public service.
And what was behind that? Whose idea was that, and why'd you keep doing it?
I think it came about, it was, sort of grew of its own. I think they played the band one morning, and somebody called them and said, that was great. We love band. I love band music. I thought it was great. And
it was also a chance for Jack to use his character, the senator.
He could take off, And the hymn was doing something that they felt good for people early in the morning to have a hymn.
And in the early 80s, we tried to take the hymn and the march away, and there was a public revolt.
Huge uproar.
Yeah, they came out of the woodwork.
You invoked the name Ken Beatrice a few minutes ago. What was it like working with Ken?
Listen to him in WBZ in Boston at night, and we had tapes of him. I said, this guy's got the worst voice I've ever heard. He sounds like he just got out of a lobster pot. But he's authoritative. He thinks he knows what he's talking about, so let's give him a shot.
So about that, what happened with him and Tony Kornheiser? Do you remember that?
I don't know what happened, but Kornheiser did a lot of research and couldn't find these scouts.
Yeah.
And he went through hell with it, and Ken got really upset and decided that he couldn't take it, so he got sick, mental sick.
Right.
But I told Tony, I said, Tony, Rodney Dangerfield doesn't have a wife, but he talks about her all the time. Ken doesn't have any scouts, but he talks about it all the time, and the public likes him.
Yeah.
Why is it a problem to you? He said, because the guy's a phony. I said, have you read your newspaper? It's a phony. I said, you can't criticize the man for being an entertainer.
Sure.
That's what he is. Don't look at him as a journalist.
As a capital J
He's
journalist.
An entertainer.
Right.
And the people love him. The guy that was the big guy at the Washington Post, you remember the name of Ben Bradley?
Yeah, I do.
Told me, he said many times he would listen. He was driving to the office because he lived out in the suburbs before he got married the second or third time.
Oh, jeez.
And he would drive home. He said some nights I'd sit in the parking, in the garage or the entrance to the garage, listen to Ken to see what is he going to do next. Like about his scouts. What did he say about these people? He said, I waited to hear what he was going to do, and then I went in the house.
So I actually
That's pretty good testimony.
As we speak, last night, literally just last night, I was sitting at home watching on HBO the Post, the movie with Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks about Watergate, and obviously you see Tom Hanks as Ben Bradley driving in his car through the streets of downtown D.C. He's listening to the radio. They should have approached to see if they could get an air check at WMAL if one exists from that era.
That would have been very cool.
I don't know who made that movie.
Yeah.
But
some guy named Spielberg, I think. I don't remember, yeah.
But the Post was a big, we used people at the Post. They used us, even though we were the star station. Right. That was a friendly rivalry till television killed the Evening Star. You know that.
Yeah.
And two things going. Traffic, we talked about that. Mm-hmm. It had tough time delivering the afternoon paper.
Yeah, of course.
And then the viewership. They were watching television. They have time to read the paper.
But this radio station also did a lot of news in the evening, right? You had like an hour-long news hour, right, in the early 70s?
We did Today in Congress with Joe McCaffrey. Paid commercial half hour every single night Congress was in session. Wow. Unheard of.
Yeah.
People would come to Washington and say, I listened to your station. It's the most mixed up conglomerate of nothing I've ever heard.
And then jazz at 7.
He said, what do you do? He said, you got a guy on Sunday that's dead named Ed Walker playing music that nobody's ever heard before. I said, his audience has heard it. They listened to it. Ed Walker was another talent. Yeah. He had his own radio show playing old music.
How about that? And for those who don't know, was blind. How did he operate a radio show? How did he read copy? Braille typewriter, the whole
Fabulous
bit.
Story.
Yeah. What do you make of podcasting? You've been at it for a while.
I never knew. Janice has suggested to me we ought to do a podcast because we know so much and have so many things going. And I said, what's a podcast? So help me. In the summer 2 years ago, I'd never heard the word. And then we simplified it and made it a radio without transmitter.
Yeah.
It's a radio show.
Yeah.
And we tape it and put it out there. But now it can be delivered in 4,000 different ways. And I think it's the future. But the future is now. Like we quote Rick Edelman, who's one of our stalwarts. Yeah. See, in addition to the talent, we had people like Rick Edelman. Is talent on this radio station. Now, he brought something else that we never thought of before.
Brokered programming. No.
You know, well, the thing.
It was, it was a first for us.
Yeah, sure.
He was the model.
He brought people to the radio.
But also good programming. Exactly.
Excellent program. As a matter of fact, I think John Lyon discovered Rick Edelman as a guest on his show. Wow. And then I was listening to, then he came as an advertiser on the station. Right. And then I convinced Jim Gallant, after a year's worth of working on him, that Rick Edelman deserved his own radio show. And so he was on every Saturday morning right before Paul Harvey.
And now it's a national show.
It is a national show.
Yeah, he's got 80-some markets, I think, with that.
Huge.
Yeah, they're up at ABC. Paul Harvey is another voice out of the blue. But he was a big part of WMAL. He was a big part of our morning show, even though he was in Chicago, because Frank and Jackson would talk about him. Yeah. And guess what? He started talking about us.
That's true.
It was incredible. Paul Harvey. I mean, we just had so much talent that Michael Collins doing his show about
the law.
The law, but he has a great theme, doesn't he?
Oh, it's the LA law theme.
Yes.
The LA law theme. And he's in titles and
estate planning, wills and trusts.
Probate. Exactly, yeah.
But they're talent.
Yeah.
You know, they came
and
to
but
it.
that ties in what you were saying earlier about the importance of good creative. You know, making sure that if people are on the radio station to sell a product, that they do it in a way that is not going to scare off or alienate the audience.
Steve, I got to tell you, the beauty about Andy was, and what made this radio station so great is, he was dictating what he wanted to hear. You know, that's the beauty of our radio station, because he had such a wide range of interests and a variety of things that he was interested in. He just made all the talent at WMAL, really, he directed it, doing it for his likes and dislikes.
Was that any more difficult, Andy, after 1977, 78, when ABC came in and bought the station from Evening Star?
No, they were better. They were broadcasted. They were better to work for than the Star. And they brought their talent to us, too, you know. Right. I had a deal with, what's his name?
Ted Koppel.
I had a deal with Ted Koppel.
Yeah, sure.
He and I had to come to agreement. He was going to do an interview with Trumbull and Core 4 or 5 times a week.
Wow.
Talk about what's coming up and so forth.
Like a promo for Nightline.
Right.
Yeah.
He said, I better check this out. Rune doesn't want me to do it.
Oh. Rune Ardledge, the president of ABC.
A legend.
Yes.
You know, people criticize Arledge because they put him in news and they said, well, he's a sports guy. No. Arledge was an entertainment guy.
Yes.
He believed in news as entertainment.
Right.
And that changed the whole complexion of the news company. You got to entertain people with the news.
Well, and not just change, but change for the better. Right? I mean, ABC was never what it was after Rune left.
No, I know that. They're a genius.
Yeah.
But, Stephen, you're doing so great with CBS.
Yeah.
They got all that talent now, but I'm still mixed up. I listen to Channel 4. They used to have CBS News. Now they got ABC News.
On Channel 4?
No, on WTOP.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
What is that all about?
I don't know. That's our crazy business.
Well, you get what you can get. There must be some money involved.
But it is talk about but talk about the craziness of our business. You know, I never thought I'd see a day where WABC in New York was not an ABC affiliate, but that's where we are.
Radio 77.
That's right.
Is that incredible?
Yeah.
WTOP was not a CBS affiliate.
Yeah, 85 years.
I don't know why. I'm going to find out from Joel why that fell apart. I don't know. Well, that was because they own a radio station here, 88.1.
Right.
So, NK boss.
We're getting the rap cue.
Stephen, yeah, but you're used to it. I'm not.
Ken wants me to sign off because I hijacked the show. Oh, you want me to do it?
Yeah, that's
all right. I don't know the formatics, but I'll say it. This is Our Town. This is Steven Portnoy interviewing Andy Ockershausen.
You've been listening to Our Town Season 4, presented by Geico, our hometown favorite, with your host, Andy Ockershausen. New Our Town episodes are released each Tuesday and Thursday. Drop us a line with your comments or suggestions. See us on Facebook or visit our website at OurTownDC.com. Our special thanks to Ken Hunter, our technical director, and WMAL Radio in Washington, D.C. And thanks to Geico. 15 minutes can save you 15% or more on car insurance.